Hi folks, Slick Slices here. Now, if you've ever watched a video on my channel, there's a pretty good chance it'll have been of a Taylor's Eyewitness knife, certainly of a Sheffield knife, and quite often it will be of a Barlow. And the vast majority of those Barlows will be made by the person that made this one here, Lee White. Now, this one featured on here some time ago, because I've been collecting Lee's knives for a long time. But I do have some Taylor's Eyewitness knives which are not made by Lee. So this one, for example, was made by a guy called Gavin Wright. And Gavin was trained up by Lee to become a premier knife maker. Unfortunately, he died very suddenly, having only made somewhere between half a dozen and 10 knives signed off in his own name, which is very sad. So that makes this knife particularly rare. And the reason you know who's made these knives is because in the box comes a little letter, and when the maker is deemed sufficiently competent to sign off their own knives, they sign them at the bottom. And here I have a letter signed by A. Smith. So who's A. Smith? I'll come to that. I do have a couple of Taylor's Witnesses, a couple of other Taylor's Witnesses knives that weren't made by Lee, but I don't know who made them. For example, this penknife here is, well, I bought it relatively recently, but it's new old stock. So the letter came and it's not signed by anybody, and that means that it's pre-Lee White, because that was when it started, the signing off of the knives. So it could be Michael May, or it could be previous to that. It's probably within the last 20 years though, not longer than that. And then I have a couple of others which are just older, and long before they thought about putting names on them. So I don't know who made this here, or this Slim Barlow. I don't know who made those, and there's no way to find out now. Plus, I'm not sure they are quite premier knives. This was definitely a premier knife, and it did come, as I say, with one of these letters, but it was just unsigned. So anyway, let's come to Mr. Smith. Who is A. Smith? A. Smith is Andrew Smith, and there is also another new maker, but I'm not seeing any of their knives yet. I think her name is Dawn Pettigrew. I'll confirm that when I see one of her knives, but I haven't seen hers yet, so can't comment on those. But this is Andrew Smith. Now, Andrew Smith has been with Taylor's Eyewitness for I think 35 years or something like that, and he's worked on kitchen knives and handle forming and stuff like that for a long time. So he's a very competent knife maker, but he's recently come on to making pocket knives, and he starts as everyone does, making their standard knives, the ones that turn out for £30 a shot or less, and that's more about speed of manufacture and getting them out the door. But once you've got the basic competence of that, then you can move on to making premier collection knives like these. And these ones, instead of being 90 to 100 in a day turned out per person, these ones are turned out it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to make one. So the price of that is obviously much higher, but the quality that comes out is also much higher. So I've got two of Andrew Smith's knives. The first one is in African Blackwood, and that is here. Leave Lee's one in there because I think we need to do some comparisons here. And the other one is again African Rosewood. And that is here. So, oops, I'm awfully clumsy. So what I want to do is just do a little bit of comparison between these knives and just have a look at how Andrew's work measures up compared to Lee's. And it's a little bit unfair because Lee's been making these knives full time every day for several years. Andrew has just, I think in the last year, he's been making these knives. But you don't get a sign off your own letter until you're competent. And so these knives are very definitely competent. And the question here is, all I'm going to be looking at is pointing out the minor differences. And before anybody thinks I'm being a bit harsh on him, you have to be quite picky to find fault, if any faults in these knives. And there's none of these have any glaring faults. But just to sort of give you an idea, I've got a couple of Lee's knives here. Now this one is a slim Barlow. Now I really like this one because I like the wood. But if we look at the back, there is, one could argue that there's a tiny amount of gapping there. Now you get that really close, it looks like a cavern, but actually it really doesn't look like it. When this was on the Bakewell Cookshop website, you could see that it showed up as a shadow in the photography. So I bought it knowing that, but I just loved the wood, and you can forgive some very minor sins like that. Another early one of Lee's that I have is this one, which I love this knife. It's just such a beautiful knife. It's a Stockman in mother of pearl. But if we wanted to be hypercritical, you can see the pin in that bolster. And when you look at the file work on the back, one side is not a perfect mirror of the other. Now, I was still prepared to buy this knife, and when I got it, I didn't just send it back and say, well, it's horrible. It's a really beautiful knife. But it just goes to show that even somebody who really can't go wrong nowadays. I mean, I haven't seen a bad knife by Lee in certainly the last 3 years. This one is older than that. But, it's possible, even for the master, to have some level of criticism. So if I criticise Andrew's knives here, it's not because he's done a bad job. He's not. But it's just because I'm being ultra picky and trying to get some idea of where he might go and where he might get better. And, well, if we start at the tip and work our way towards the back, we can have a little look. Blades and the blade grinds are not bad at all. The only thing that I did notice, now this may be stylistic or it may be a mistake, and I can't tell you which, but there's a degree of recurve in these blades here and here, and the thickness of the bevel on this one is very similar to one of Lee's. On this one it's just a little bit wider, particularly down here. So that's just a wee thought. In terms of the nail nick, now it's one of the things that they renew every now and again, and the stamp for the nail nick was renewed, I think it was about a year or 18 months ago, and suddenly the nail nicks went very, very deep. And these two, I just noticed, very recent production, the nail nick is much shallower. It's not so shallow as to be a problem. Possibly, actually, it's more attractive, so it may even be deliberate that he's done that. The big nail nick is easy to clean out. The little nail nicks accumulate less gunk, so, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. In terms of the tang stamps, I've no issues with either. And the blade kick, as the kick is this little bit here, is the measure of whether the kick is right or not is when you close the knife, does it create any blade wrap, or does the point stick out at the end? And the answer to that is no in both cases, so they're absolutely fine. There's no issues with those at all. When it comes to the bolsters, you can slightly see, if you get the light right, the pin in the bolster here, and very slightly see it in this African rosewood one, but it's almost completely invisible, and it really is a matter of getting the light right. You can't see that in Lee's one at all. If we turn that over, that side you can't see it at all, and that side you can't see it at all. So, you know, that's very nearly there. I suppose I should look at Lee's, shouldn't I? Just to be on the safe side. No, fine. Not a surprise. Right, so also on the bolsters. Now, there is something this wouldn't be a deal breaker if you got one of these. In fact, some ways you might argue it's better. The stamp of the Eyewitness Sheffield England is much lighter on this one. Now, that means it's either wasn't stamped as hard, or it's been, when in the hafting process, it's been ground back just a little bit further. It's one or the other, but it means that the border around the outside of the Eyewitness stamp isn't as clear. It's only clear in this bottom corner here and slightly up this side, but the rest of it is missing. Now, is that a problem? I don't know. And if you didn't have knives to compare them to, you probably wouldn't notice. And it's sort of similar on the back. You can see the line along the bottom of the border, but not up the sides. Now, you know, some people might argue that's the way it should be. I don't know. I can't say for certain. But anyway, that's just a wee thing. The rest of the hafting is nice and smooth. And I was going to say, I don't think you can just catch your nail in that one just. You can't. There's no visible gap, but you can sort of slightly feel it with your nail. So that's fine. The one thing I have perhaps noticed that is different, and now this could be to do with the wood that's being used. The African rosewood has a much flatter panel to the side of the scale, whereas this is more crowned, and this is more crowned. Although again, this is again slightly flatter. These corners are slightly more pronounced in Andrew's knives than they are in Lee's, but I don't think that's not a right or wrong thing. I think that's just one of those things that's the way that he's ground them. I mean, for example, if we had a bokeh here, you'll find that they're very flat as well. And if you had a case, I haven't got a case one out, but if I'd got a case one out, they're completely flat. So I think that's just a stylistic thing rather than something one might criticise. If I turn them over and have a little look at the Workback stuff. I should have started the other end because I'm probably going to knock them all over now. You see? I knew I was going to do that. So I'll just bring these back up here a little bit. So we look at the Workback now. I would think this is the signature that you can see of a knife. The style now, I would think Lee has a very flowing file work. These curves are all nice and flowing. I think they're also these are tighter. Now these are actually quite flowing as well, but they have a deeper, the kind of little thorn part of it is a little bit deeper. Now, there is no right or wrong to that. That is purely style. When I look at Michael May's knives, I haven't got one out to show you, but I would think his are more geometric, whereas Lee's are softer. I like them both. I think I probably prefer Lee's to Michael's, but it's not. Again, it's not a right or a wrong. I mean, if you compare them to the Workback on an Arthur Wright, it's completely different. What's better? You know, I don't know. But I do think, you know, people do create a style, and it's quite clear that Andrew's style is slightly different to Lee's. Now, one thing that perhaps one could criticise slightly is that I think the scale on this side is very slightly thicker than the scale on this side, on the African Blackwood one. But again, How much wider is it? Again, it's slightly wider on this side than it is on this side, but by a millimetre. It's not a gaping difference between one and the other. So I don't think there's anything in that that's worrying. I think what you get from that is a clear indication that these are done by hand and not put in a machine and ground as I think some knives are these days. So I don't think we have any real problems there. We could perhaps argue that that's not 100% symmetrical either, but more because it's almost like this edge here has been perhaps ground off slightly more than that one, but perhaps when we look at it that way, sort of see what I mean. But again, I think that's just enough to show you that these are handmade knives. Now, obviously, I should also say, move these out of the way while I do this, or I'm going to damage something. When you close these knives, they have a good hard half stop, and they're closed end knives, even in the half stop. A bit of gunk in there that could have done with being cleaned out. Now these knives are on loan from the Bakewell Cookshop, so I'm not going to do anything with them, but there is a bit of gunk in there. That's just polish that's not been cleaned out. Should really look nice and clean like that. Again, there's a bit of polish in that one. That probably could have been cleaned out. That's something that perhaps should be attended to. And in fact, when you look inside there, there's a bit of polish too. Tad in there as well, but not too much. Right, last thing. Again, I say they're closed end when they're closed. That's the Lee white one, beautifully centered. This one is tad off to the left, but it's not touching or anything, not rubbing, but it's very slightly off to the left. And again, I think you can see that slight asymmetry. It's very, very slight there. And finally, this one is, you could say it's very slightly favouring the left, but it's so close to centre that I don't think there's anything there to worry about. Anyway, that one's mine. These two belong to the Bakewell Cookshop. These two will be back in stock at the Bakewell Cookshop, possibly even by the time you see this video, because this is Sunday. I'll be sending them off tomorrow. They'll be back with them probably on Tuesday, and available for sale at the price of £175 each. And if you want to buy one of them or one of the others that they've got in stock, either one of Andrew's or one of Lee's, then if you use my name, Slick Slicers, or Eric, you'll get 5% off, and I'll get 5% for the channel towards picking up another one to add to the collection and bring to the channel for you to all see. So thank you very much. If you like the stuff, please give a thumbs up. If you would like to see more of this stuff, then please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. Thank you very much. Bye.